During a wrestler's time in WWE, it doesn't always work out the way they wanted. This often leads to them leaving the company on bad terms. The wrestler is then prone to spending the next few years bad-mouthing WWE and everyone in it, and promising that they will never return to WWE under any circumstances. However, more often than not, money talks, and the wrestler ends up letting bygones be bygones and rejoining the WWE. But which ones were they? Join us now as Wrestlelamia looks at 10 wrestlers who sold their soul to WWE. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos, and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists. Also check out Wrestlelamia.co.uk and on our wrestling channel, Incredible. Number 10. Zelina Vega. In 2020, WWE introduced a new mandate that ruled that all WWE talent would be banned from using third-party platforms. This meant that talents would be unable to use popular sites such as Twitch and OnlyFans. This decision received widespread backlash, and one superstar in particular, that being Zelina Vega, went the extra mile with her criticism of WWE's new rule. Vega would tweet in favor of unionization, and she was eventually fired from WWE. Vega had a successful Twitch channel, and it was clear that Vega simply didn't want to surrender this extra income. Despite being completely against WWE's new ruling, Vega rather shockingly rejoined WWE just 8 months later. Vega had put aside all resentment to return to the company, and all the issues that Vega had which led to her release were suddenly non-existent. Number 9. Eric Bischoff. During the 1990s, Eric Bischoff made it his mission to take WCW to the next level and put WWE out of business for good. Whilst Bischoff gave this a good go, and for a while it looked like WCW was going to come out victorious in the Monday Night Wars, a number of infamous creative and managerial decisions led to the downfall of Bischoff's WCW. Following them being purchased by WWE in 2001, Bischoff was adamant that he was never going to work for WWE, as he couldn't possibly work under Vince McMahon. However, in 2002, Bischoff randomly showed up on Raw, embraced McMahon, and was named the new general manager of Raw. According to Bischoff in his book Controversy Creates Cash, it was a deep and personal phone call with McMahon that made Bischoff agree to come work with WWE. Bischoff stated, "Vince was very gracious. The feeling I got was that he understood what I had gone through. While he came out on top, he understood what the Monday Night Wars and everything else had meant and had some empathy for me. He didn't say it, but I felt it. I hung up the phone and said to my wife, I can work for this guy. If the offer's right, I'd like to go back." Bischoff would end up working in the GM role for a number of years and would receive significant praise for his commitment and passion for his authoritative role. Number 8. Goldberg. Goldberg's WWE run, which lasted one calendar year between 2003 to 2004, wasn't a great experience for the wrestling legend. Goldberg was a huge star in WCW, but he wasn't used to the micromanagement that WWE thrived on, and Goldberg consequently became miserable and mentally exhausted. Goldberg had a ton of heat with Triple H, as he believed for the longest time that Triple H was going out of his way to outright bury him. Goldberg also wasn't the most popular talent backstage. He had an infamous run-in with Chris Jericho, who was rather well liked backstage, meaning that Goldberg became pretty much a loner. Goldberg admitted in the past that he had a lot of resentment towards WWE and a return was unlikely, but in 2016 he agreed to come back to the company. Since then, Goldberg has won the Universal title on 2 separate occasions and has even been featured in matches against Roman Reigns, Bobby Lashley, and even The Undertaker. The relationship between both sides has certainly been healed. Number 7. Scott Steiner. When WWE re-signed Scott Steiner in 2002, they had big plans for the former WCW World Champion. Steiner had a phenomenal look and had a ton of natural charisma. The issue was that Steiner had drop foot, meaning that he simply wasn't the WCW's version of Steiner. Furthermore, Steiner, even though he was pushed into the main event, had truly awful matches with Triple H. Their match at the Royal Rumble in 2003 is widely regarded as one of the worst matches of the time. For almost 2 decades, Steiner stated that he blamed Triple H for his WWE run being an utter failure and would make rather disturbing comments towards the McMahon family. At one stage, the relationship between Steiner and WWE was so bad that Steiner was outright banned from attending the Hall of Fame ceremony. However, in 2022, a miracle occurred. The WWE announced that Scott Steiner, along with his brother Rick, would be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Nobody saw this coming, and in later interviews, Steiner would say that he needed to let the past go and he needed to move on. This was great to see, and fans continue to hope that Steiner will work in WWE on future projects. Number 6. Bruno Sanmartino. The legendary Bruno Sanmartino holds the record for being the longest reigning WWE champion in history at over 2,800 days, and this record is unlikely to ever be broken. Sanmartino is a certified icon of the wrestling world, but his relationship with WWE began to break down in the 90s. Sanmartino became extremely outspoken on his thoughts about the company. He felt like the company's direction wasn't working, and he was openly critical in relation to the use of steroids and drugs in modern-day wrestlers. Even though WWE reached out to Sanmartino for him to come back to work on a new project, he outright refused, and he would often cite Vince McMahon's vision of wrestling as damaging. Nevertheless, in 2013, Triple H managed to rekindle the relationship between Sanmartino and McMahon, and this led to Sanmartino putting aside all bad blood and entering the WWE Hall of Fame. Number 5. Bret Hart. It's well documented just how controversial Bret Hart's 1997 departure was. Following the Montreal Screwjob, the relationship between Hart and Vince McMahon was officially dead in the water. Hart would even punch McMahon in the face backstage following the Screwjob, which goes to show just how furious he was. Over the next few years, Hart would completely distance himself from WWE. He would turn down several offers for him to return to the company. Hart was hurt and broken by McMahon's actions. Even though he agreed to return in 2006 to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, he refused to be featured at WrestleMania 22 the following night. Somehow, someway though, in 2010, Bret Hart agreed to finally return to the company. Bret wanted closure and he wanted to make amends. He fixed his relationship with McMahon as well as Shawn Michaels, and Hart would even compete in a match at WrestleMania 26 against former WWE chairman. Number 4. Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar was one of the biggest stars of the Ruthless Aggression era, but he left WWE in 2004 on bad terms. Lesnar informed WWE that he was miserable and he was leaving after WrestleMania 20. Unfortunately for Lesnar, he had a legal battle ahead of him as he had a non-compete clause which was set to last for the next 6 years. Lesnar won this legal battle, and this allowed him to wrestle in New Japan Pro Wrestling as well as to go on to become one of the biggest box office draws in UFC history. This legal battle booked to put an end to any of the plans for Lesnar and WWE to ever work again, but amazingly in 2012, Lesnar put his issues with the company aside and he's been a prominent fixture in the company for the past decade. Number 3. The Ultimate Warrior. The 2014 return of the Ultimate Warrior came as a massive surprise to fans. The Warrior and WWE had a toxic relationship as they produced a controversial documentary in 2005 which detailed how much of a problem Warrior was during his time in WWE. Warrior for several years believed that WWE misrepresented him in the documentary, and Warrior would state publicly that he wanted nothing to do with Vince McMahon or the WWE. It was actually a miracle that Warrior put this animosity behind him, and thankfully he did, as WWE and Warrior managed to reconcile just before his untimely passing. Warrior's return in 2014 would see Warrior take his rightful place in the Hall of Fame, and appeared during his appearance that he had grown as a person, and a lot of the resentment that Warrior felt towards WWE and McMahon had just been forgotten about. Number 2. Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes was one of the key figures involved in the creation and success of AEW. Rhodes helped implement the popular promotion after his WWE departure in 2016, and this came after Rhodes was unhappy with his position in WWE, as he aimed for bigger and better things. During his time in AEW as both an in-ring talent and as an executive, Rhodes would take a number of shots directly at WWE, and he would even take shots at Triple H. Rhodes would state that he had no interest in going back to WWE and he was perfectly happy in AEW. However, in 2022, this all changed. Shockingly, Rhodes returned to the WWE at WrestleMania 38, leaving behind his prominent executive role in AEW in favor of returning to the company that he'd been criticizing for the past few years. Rhodes would discuss why he decided to return to WWE during an interview with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and this is what the former Intercontinental Champion had to say. The bottom line is that it was my baby, it's growing up and people are having fun and it doesn't need me. Why I thought it didn't need me? I'm not being totally honest. Maybe it did need me, but here's what I needed. I did not want to be a gatekeeper wrestler. I did not want to be, this is Cody's thing, AEW. Some people look at it that way. Not everybody does. But first program they wrestle Cody, and then they do Chris Jericho's podcast. There's a whole meme about it. I didn't want to be a gatekeeper. And number 1, Jeff Jarrett. The idea of Jeff Jarrett working for WWE at one stage seemed impossible. Jarrett had a controversial departure from WWE in 1999 as it was reported that he held up Vince McMahon for a rumored $200,000 in order to drop the Intercontinental title to China at the No Mercy pay-per-view. Following a successful run in WCW, Jarrett would create TNA, which would act as an alternative to WWE for a number of substantial years. Jarrett was a true rival to WWE, and it appeared as if McMahon had a personal dislike of Jarrett as a human being. Fast forward to 2018 and Jarrett was randomly announced as an inductee into the Hall of Fame. Jarrett and McMahon had made amends, and this relationship would only get better as in 2022 Jarrett would be officially named as the Senior Vice President of Live Events for WWE. But there you have it folks, 10 wrestlers who sold their soul to WWE. Be sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.